choosing names that are different from our birth names. When somebody born a man chooses to be called by a woman's name, how important is that really? Recent research suggests that the words we use for our transgender friends, family, fellow workers, and fellow students really affects their risk for suicidal thoughts and behaviors. Sammy, welcome to Brainsplain.
Thank you, good to be here.
I sat down outside of the University of Wisconsin's Memorial Library to talk about suicide among transgendered people. I began by sharing some alarming statistics. 41% of transgender people have attempted suicide at least once, versus 4.6% of the general population. For transgender teenagers, about 30% have attempted suicide.
That's an amazing statistic.
That's surprising, it makes sense. 40% is an alarming number.
Even despite these bleak statistics, there's new research pointing to a way to have hope. This is what I'd come out here to discuss. Because there's a way of cutting down on suicide by 65% in that at-risk group. The Journal of Adolescent Health shows that there's a link between honoring transgender teenagers' choice of name and decreasing their risk for suicide. It's if you allow transgender people to use their chosen names as opposed to their given names at school, at home, at work, and when they're with their friends. Coming from vastly different circumstances, my conversation partners shared ways to affirm transgender people that we know. Some of these ways were not obvious.
I'm gender non-conforming. I guess that's sort of the umbrella term trans. It seems odd in conversation, hey, I'm so-and-so, you're so-and-so, what are your preferred pronouns? But that's a really cool thing for people to say. No one ever asks me, they just assume it's he, him, his, but it's I respond to that because I get it. I'm a mostly male-presenting individual, but I really feel right with they, them, theirs.
My niece is transgender, male to female, and she prefers, the whole family prefers to use her new name. She does well at home, but in the community, it's pretty rough. It's hard to get employment. Especially where she lives, it's a very conservative area, and the community is not very accepting.
I think the study that I read showed that if somebody's transgender and they're accepted in one of those contexts, at home, at school, at work, with their friends, and people use their chosen name, that it does move the needle also. You get the huge effect when it's all of the contexts, but I would say what your family is doing is amazing for your niece. Do you know anybody who identifies as something other than their birth gender?
Yeah, I do.
Do they have a chosen name that's different from their given name?
A couple of them do have chosen names. My best friend back at home in Portland is transgender, and just hearing of her struggles with having to conform to society that really is only thinking in two genders is really hard.
One of the things that we do, so I'm in pharmacy school, and one of the things is when people show up to, or transgender people show up to pharmacies, a lot of the time their insurance won't process through because they were born, male, but they self-identify as female. And so we had some patients come in on a transgender panel and talk about what it's like when they're working with the other healthcare providers. And a lot of times when you have the old school providers who refuse to acknowledge that, they've now, for my understanding anyways, developed kind of a list of providers who they're safe to go to, that offer these safe spaces, who talk to them about what their preferred gender pronouns and refer to them by the names that they're given.
I went into the funeral business. It definitely does come up in the funeral business. It comes up in issues with the death certificate, and actually how do they identify? Do we put on male or female on the death certificate, and what was their legal name? And then if their legal name that they were born with, is Stephen, and that's what they have on all of their IDs, we have to put Stephen down, but then in their AKA we can put, if they wanted to be called Vanessa. And so there, I feel like something has to change there.
In accepting transgender people, it's often their choice of name that can be a bridge too far for many Americans. The sad thing is that for transgender people, our failure to accept their names, that can be a bridge too far for them. I believe if Americans knew the significance of these choices of name, there'd be no debate about whether or not we honor transgender people by calling them the names they choose.
Why don't we just let, if it does help so much, just let them use their name, the names they want.
You can make such a huge difference in people's lives just by following this one simple thing. If I want to be called Amber, call me Amber. You know, it's really not that hard.